Returnal is the type of game that will absolutely eat your babies. The bosses eats babies. The story eats babies. All the little crispy little critters. Even thine babies eat babies. As decadently dark, audibly booming, and adrenaline rushing of a game Housemarque's PlayStation 5 exclusive is, it has no problem kicking your ass and devouring your children in front of you. Perhaps in a slaw from dusters or some kind of soup stew situation. The Tower of Sisyphus DLC is no different, with an endless spiral of increasingly difficult enemy encounters. While death begets us all in the end, avoiding these mistakes will absolutely help you prolong your stay in the tower and conquer the mystical Algos aiming to leave your Selene just another lost scout. So, without any further ado, here are Gruster's Tips presents, with thoughtful incorporation from G. Grustington, additional funding from the Cribs Foundation. Gruster's Tips. How to achieve glory in the Tower of Sisyphus. Breaking news! I'm afraid to report, Gruster is dead.
It's so hard to say goodbye to yesterday.
So, without any further ado, here are
Captain Nutleaf Winterthorn's tasty tips for the Tower of Sisyphus. Tasty tip numero uno. You've gotta believe to achieve. Monsters aren't real. Robots shall not enslave us all yet. But all it takes to achieve is to believe. Tasty tip number 2.
breaking news. Captain Nutleaf Winterthorns is dead.
It's so hard to say goodbye to yesterday.
Gruster resurrects. I may have risen from the dead, but in the Tower of Sisyphus, you cannot. In the main game of Returnal, there are 2 key artifacts that can provide you with a revive of sorts, as well as some parasites that'll help you survive a killing blow, but come with a harsh downside. These artifacts are absent from the tower. Knowing that death really is the end of your run no matter what, should help emphasize a few important details. First, this guide will be split in 3 main sections. We'll begin by covering your equipment, weapons, artifacts, consumables, parasites. Then I'll go over some core gameplay mechanic tips, like dashing and overall movement, minimap awareness, and swordplay. These sections will help in your ascension of the tower, but are also useful tips for Returnal in general. In the final section though, I'll cover some advice that specifically goes over aspects of the tower, so make sure to stay to the end for all the gooey details. Gruster's Armament. Being a roguelike game means more than just permadeath for Returnal. It means each run you'll craft a unique build of weapons, artifacts, consumables, and parasites to help you on your journey. So what's going to give you the best chances at survival? Consumables. With consumables, the most important thing to remember is they have no value once you die. We all can take on that persona at times. A big old sleazy dragon sleeping on piles of hoarded gold and nibbling on rat carcasses. But you're really better off using your consumables when you can. New to the tower are consumable weapons that can pretty much clear a room instantly or greatly help with an Algos fight. and while they do vary a bit between the 4 different types of consumable weapons, they all at least do the job of killing enemies fast. So having a couple of those stockpiled for boss fights are definitely worth it. My personal favorites would be the Absolution Disgorger that explodes everything with high damaging charge shots, and the Blightwave Disgorger that pretty much is an aimbot for 10 seconds. Other than saving some weapons for boss fights, the only real reason to hoard consumables is in case you're hoping for that elusive consumable reusing parasite or artifact. If you manage to snag this bonus, you'll have a 20 to 25% chance of keeping a consumable upon use. It's risky to hoard for this as you might not come across the artifact at all during your run, but the payoff can be big. If you get it with like 5 shield vials and those end up becoming 8 shields instead, booyah! Artifacts. Speaking of artifacts, the overall selection is reduced from the main game to give some more consistency in the tower runs. This makes it a bit easier to create a top tier streamlined build while still having a bit of variety. Gruster's go-to method is to pick things that synergize well. Multiple artifacts that increase parasite benefits, or multiples that focus on melee upgrades, or bonuses from successful overloads. Those are all strong elements to build around. Some must-have artifacts for Gruster would include the Resin Shield to give you that extra boost of defense, Melee Executioner that'll give you speed and protection buffs once you get a melee kill, and Overload Recharge so every time you overload, your alt fire cooldown reduces a bit. Keep experimenting during your runs to find what style fits you best, and keep yourself malleable to adapt your style to the artifacts you get. Parasites. Next are Parasites, and these are pretty straightforward. Gain a benefit at the cost of a negative. Or not sometimes. There are some great artifacts that increase the benefits of Parasites in multiple ways, so synergize further if a Parasite heavy build works for you. The main things to remember are not to accept any negatives that you aren't comfortable with, as they can end up hampering your gameplay more than you think at first. And always take a Parasite with no negatives if you come across it. Lastly, I'm not sure if this is intentional or will get patched out, but whenever you have a Parasite decision with a Detacher available, you can get the best of both worlds. Before choosing the Parasite you want, pick the other one. Usually you can't take both Parasites, but if you detach the one you didn't want, you'll get 50 Obolites, and now you can take the one you really wanted. Of course, if the Parasites have a detach negative, it's probably not worth it unless it's benign. And if you've already stacked multiple Parasites, the one that's detached is random, so it might not be worth the gamble of losing your good benefits. But especially for the very first Parasite decision you come across, if there's a Detacher nearby, it's always worth it to take the free 50. Weaponry. Lastly, we've got the aspect of your equipment that will affect your battles the most. The weaponry. And look at you, you spry little youthful turtle, filled with jubilance and spryful luck. Because good old Gruster is gonna sneak in his Returnal weapons tier list and give you a little breakdown for each one. The weapons are ordered inside the tiers, and I believe the letters are accurate as well. No weapon feels unusable or completely unfun in this game, so all are ultimately viable choices. I'll also mention that the tier list is based on my personal opinion, factoring in 3 main aspects: the overall gameplay strength of the weapon, the synergy it can have with artifacts and other aspects of your build, and just how fun the gun is overall. I won't go over the specifics on the alt fire, but they are included in the visual to get an idea. Some alt fires are super useful to have, but I personally wouldn't take a lower tiered gun over a higher one just because of the alt fire.
Bruh!
So starting from the bottom up, we've got the Dreadbound. Dreadbound makes me sad, because I get the idea of it. you lose out on the overload ability entirely in exchange for some straightforward but powerful traits. And breaking news!
Bruh!
Upon further review, the Dreadbound damage is just kinda super insane. I would still dock it for just being kind of straightforward and lacking super cool traits, but I did kind of underestimate like how insane the damage is from those traits. So if I was going to replace the Dreadbound on the tier list, I would put them somewhere around the top of S tier, either right above or below the Coilspine Shredder. Yeah, it does damage, but you gotta hit it.
Tachyomatic Carbine.
Next up is the Tachyo, the bread and butter machine gun of the crew. While it has one of the most useful traits with the life-stealing leech rounds, and can either shoot a lot faster or a lot stronger depending on the other traits, it's just too run-of-the-mill. It's an easy, straightforward gun that gets the job done, but is mainly a jack-of-all-trades, master of none. Not insane damage, not insane speed, nor any wildly unique traits. It'll generally have me skipping a Tachyo in favor of others higher on the list. But it should not be understated how useful leech rounds can be, especially deeper in the tower, so it ends up above Dreadbound strictly for that benefit. The Pyroshell Caster. Pyroshell has the novelty of bouncy projectiles with a delayed explosion, and that can make it a kind of fun playstyle, almost like setting traps. It's got a bit more power in each shot than the Tachyo, and some of the traits can really add damage and extra projectiles that'll just wipe out an enemy group. But, like the Tachyo, it's sort of just another hold the button until ammo runs out then overload weapon without any really cool traits.
The Hollowseeker.
The classic of choice for those who just want to hold the button, the Hollowseeker is right in the middle of this tier list because that's how I feel about it. Split down the middle. On one hand, it has some pretty damn awesome traits. Portals appearing from your gunfire is cracked, oscillating fire is strong and looks purty, waves and damage over time aspects are both fun. But jeez, does it take forever to get an overload with this gun, along with an overall lower damage output than most of the other weapons. If you don't have many overload bonuses, this can still be a solid choice, especially if you enjoy keeping a big distance between yourself and enemies. But the overall gunplay isn't exciting enough for me to put this higher, along with how much I value consistent overloads and synergizing with artifacts. The Modified Sidearm, SDM8. The classic. Honestly, the pistol is always worth getting a good feel of and upgrading the traits for, strictly because you will always start with this weapon in the main game or the tower, aside from daily challenges. So having some pistol tricks is worth it, especially when this weapon packs a lot more punch than you might expect at first. Traits like Burst Fire and the Snub Nose are actually pretty fun and make it feel like you've got a mini hand cannon with how much damage they add. But the real key is Shrapnel, Serrated Projectiles, and that juicy ricochet. Once you've got a combo of some of these traits, you get the benefit of shooting wildly without aim like the Hollowseeker, while also having the benefit of much stronger shots and a quicker overload. Of the straightforward automatic weapons, the pistol actually ends up my top pick, especially with the right traits. Charge kinda sucks though. Thermogenic Launcher. If you just want to press one button and kill everything, the Thermo is for you. It's pretty much a rocket launcher, and what's really cool are the two varying styles that can develop depending on the traits. Either you go down the Mega Rocket route, which makes each shot come out like a giant rocket of death, or you get the full auto trait, and that'll turn the weapon into an automatic fire, and becomes the best automatic fire weapon in the game, in my opinion. The damage is just so high with this weapon, And you have really nice supportive traits like tailfire or replicating hits that add extra stronger projectiles and homing projectiles if you hit. So the loss in accuracy doesn't hurt much. If you find yourself asking, why aren't they dead yet? When dealing with a mini boss or tougher enemy, it might benefit you to try out the Thermogenic Launcher, especially with full auto rounds, to get used to the more high damaging weaponry. The Coilspine Shredder. The first of 2 weapons with a one-shot reload, the Coilspine is supremely underrated in my view. Aside from this style of reload weapon being the most skill intensive, the Coilspine has some sick traits. Negating discs will eliminate enemy projectiles when you shoot, giving a lot of room to breathe. And Enhanced Charge gives you damage that's unparalleled in this game. The big thing though is what I said at the start. You shoot once and then you get to overload. If your overloads can reduce alt fire cooldown or give you shield breaking shots or even something like overload bolts in the main game, this weapon style becomes borderline broken. The downside is that it actually is skill intensive. If you miss the reloads, it can feel super sluggish and just ruin your flow state. But if you like a challenge and can learn the rhythm of shot overload shot, the most adrenaline packed and enjoyable moments in this game for me are dashing around, shooting and overloading constantly into a perfect room clear. Electropylon Driver. At first, the Electro can seem a little bit underwhelming, especially if you're only shooting directly at your enemies. But once you figure out the power of pylons, it can easily be the most fun weapon in the game. Creating a maze of damaging pylons for your enemies to ensnare themselves within is just so damn juicy, and the pylon web upgrade makes this even more apparent. But aside from that key trait, the big thing about Electro is all the traits are damn useful. You can get more health drops with the Sisyphean extractor, you get protection when standing in your own web with protected pylons, and the Electro should absolutely be the weapon of choice for any melee enthusiasts. With a trait that increases your melee damage, and another trait that makes your pylons give off a burst of damage when you get a melee kill, the EP driver works hand in hand with a run and gun and slice playstyle. Spitmaw Blaster! Maybe the Spitmaw could be a little lower, but the fun factor just puts this one through the roof for me. Shotguns are always boombastic, but also add stinky stanky poison gas clouds, the option to go automatic with the rapid fire trait, and just immense damage makes this gun super fun. The swampy aesthetic of the gun is probably the coolest thing to me, but the actual weapon behind the name backs it up well with a great run and gun style that benefits mid-range. Perfect for keeping you close enough to collect obolites from dead enemies or zoom in for a melee kill, but also having that space to dash and dodge when needed. Rotgland Lobber. The true pinnacle of weaponry, a golden chalice of deliciousness that gives you everything you could ask for, the Rotgland Lobber is the most fun I have with Returnal. Firstly, it's an anagram for real goo, BRB, don't lick the nipples. More importantly, however, it's the only other weapon with the one-shot reload like Coilspine, in addition to some extra gooey benefits. You've got some of the best damage over time in the game. Gooey portals that appear from the dead remains of your foes. Trails of noxious goo left in your wake. Tendrils ensnaring your opponents from below. And that sweet, sweet benefit of those constant overloads. Like the Coilspine, this weapon is one of the most skill intensive in the game. But they do both have possible traits that will increase their ammo, so you can shoot a bit more before overloading if that's your style. But everything from the sounds and sights of the projectiles, the joy of hitting overload after overload in succession, and the actual gun packing a super strong punch behind it all, puts the gooey globber at the top of my list, and the official Gruster's Choice selection. Gruster's Gaming! Now that we've gone over the equipment you can encounter, the most important aspect is how to make this all work together. To start, I will say this: practice! To complete all of the Algos forms and to snag a spot on that leaderboard, got to have situational awareness that comes with repeated runs and just playing the game. So what aspects can we focus on to actually make the practice and play show improvement over time? Variety. As if you were tasked with creating a new polyhedral neutrino Karangus field, you've got to experiment. Try other artifacts here and there, see what negatives of parasites you can handle well, and most importantly, try all the weapons. Weapon traits won't develop unless you actually use the weapon enough to level it up. I recommend getting every trait in the game on every weapon to at least level 1 completion. This will actually show you what the traits are and how they work, plus it just gives you the fun of exploring the variety of weapon styles. Mess around in a run and see what traits you can upgrade. This also has a concrete benefit in the tower runs. You're given the option of a new weapon pretty frequently, which means before you know it, the weapon you're currently using will be too low a level for your current enemies. Once you reach max level 45, this becomes irrelevant, so at that point you can use whatever weapon clicks best for you and even take it the whole way if you want. Whenever you pick up a new weapon, especially ones that either rapid fire or not, or have different magazine sizes, practice the reload a bit. Shooting around and getting overload, do it while dashing, running, jumping. Master the overload timing for whatever weapon you have, with the adrenaline bonus and without, and your runs will go nice and buttery. Movement. The two key actions you're doing in Returnal are shooting and moving, and the movement is definitely a highlight with all the grappling and dashing you can do. You have 5 key movement options in the game. Your walk/light jog into your full run, then you've got jump, dash, and grapple to round out the options, and having full control of them all is key. Practice jogging into a run, doing quick turns and zigzag patterns, and knowing what your run speed can outpace. With dashing, you actually have 2 different ones. A quick short hop dash when you press the button slightly, and a longer full hop dash when you hold the button. Mastering the distance on both these dashes and when to use each one will help a lot, especially when incorporating dashing with the other movement elements. Grappling is your best tool for crossing long distances and putting space between yourself and enemies, or to close the gap to execute them. But of course, this is contingent on the location of the grapple points in the room you're in. A great tip with grappling is that you can press the grapple button again as you're flying through the air to let go of the grapple early, but keep your momentum. This is a great way to slightly change where you end up or just get a little boost of speed from the grapple without traveling the entire distance. Combine this with an aerial dash and you can immediately change your direction and halt your momentum, making for some really fun movement mix-ups and giving you the edge of speed over the enemies. So explore all these movement options until you know them well and can utilize them in conjunction with each other and your attacks. Using movement to avoid attacks, like jumping over lasers or going through them, make sure to commit to one of your actions. Treat each laser/projectile individually or in waves. Obviously, learn the patterns of enemies and try and exploit that. Swordplay. The unsung hero of combat, the Atropian blade is your only constant equipment through everything. While the blade is super strong at what it does, it can also be kinda janky with how it closes the gap. Still, especially with artifacts that benefit it, melee attacks are always good to utilize. Whenever you melee, Celine gets a little boost that homes in on the nearest enemy to help align the slice. Practice to fully know this distance. One of my favorite techniques is to melee, then immediately dash back, and from there either melee again or start shooting. And of course, for the real melee enthusiasts, using those Electropylon Driver traits and utilizing that weapon will absolutely benefit a sword slashing playstyle. Lastly for this section, just a few more random tips. First, break pillars whenever you get the chance because it takes 2 seconds and sometimes you come across free money and sometimes you come across an extra enemy, which means free money and a bump up on your adrenaline level. and don't give up. Sometimes it feels like it's over even when it just started. Aw dang, aw dang, aw dang. Don't ever give up on that run until it truly is done. You never know when things will pick up, when you'll come across a safe room that gives you a full heal and a pick-me-up. Even if things aren't going so hot and you won't get a new high score, focus on what you can learn and improve on within the run itself. Gruster's a Sisyphean Antiquity. While most of this advice so far can help with your Returnal gameplay in general, there are a few key aspects to the tower that are worth focusing on as well.
First, always keep an eye open for Pyloids. These mysterious white urchins lead to a mini break room, often provides an artifact or parasite, in addition to always including an Atropian key that you can use to get the consumable weapons. Destroying the green protectors first if they are nearby is key, but otherwise, if you see a Pyloid, immediately go for it before it disappears. A tip to help with this is to look at your minimap when a room starts. If there's already a red arrow, especially if it's only one, then most likely it's a Pyloid. Next, get a feel for the platforming rooms in the tower. Every now and then, you won't have enemies to conquer in a room, but lasers to avoid and some goodies to collect. Movement practice will directly increase your success at platforming rooms, but just keep in mind that you're not timed on these levels, so you can take the time to understand the patterns. It's worth it to explore the entire area and get as many goodies as you can. Pay attention to whether you can dash or not, and whether it's red or purple lasers obstructing your path, as you can't dash through purple without taking damage. In addition to platform rooms, you'll have some choice rewards rooms, where you can only pick one goodie from a choice of 2 or 3. For those, really just choose whatever you need most in the moment, health or money or weaponry, and enjoy a little break to catch your breath. In this composition, I personally recommend always taking the shield, but really anything is viable except for choosing calibration when you're already maxed leveled. Finally, we have the big kahuna of the tower, the boss of every phase, Algos. Personally, I find the full-on bosses to be some of the easiest fights in the game. As opposed to being swamped with little enemies from all angles or mini-bosses that can jump you randomly, the bosses are very straightforward. And at the start of every Algos fight, he will shoot these 2 waves of fast blue orbs, so be ready to run past the first, then immediately jump/dash to avoid the second. Learn the attack patterns, hit the weak spot, and you can pretty much do the same technique every time to win. My recommendations are using your consumable weapons here, but only once Algos has 2 or more health bars before his final form. Wipe the first one with regular damage, then use the consumable to finish the further health bars. The more damage you have in general, the better, because Algos' attacks can get trickier as the fight goes on, so you really want to end it early. But just follow what I did in this video segment and you can easily take out all 3 phases of Algos without a scratch, just like me. Also, it doesn't really do anything but save a couple seconds, but a little tip is to jump before the Algos malfunction hits you to gain control a little faster. Speaking of those, keep an eye on your malfunctions. Permanent malfunctions will start after each Algos fight, and you really can't do anything to influence or remove them. So just being cognizant of them is always important, especially for more brutal malfunctions like hostiles countering on every hit or leaving behind pools of acid. You can get normal malfunctions too through some enemy attacks, but try your hardest to avoid the red arrow attacks and mitigate any unnecessary malfunctions. Step final, return. While it is true that the Tower of Sisyphus is an endless endeavor, as its namesake foretold, there are some key milestones you can still hit. Beating Room 20 of Phases 1, 2, and 3 will give each form of Algos to defeat. And once you get to Phase 4, Room 20, you can fight the first Algos Infinity form, which then is the consistent boss from there onward. Hopefully these Gruster's tips and tricks can help you in that journey to 420 and beyond. as well as collecting all the poppies and exploring the hospital to get that extra bit of story goodness. Where do you stack up on the Tower of Sisyphus leaderboards? Would you enjoy some tips on how to reach higher on the daily challenges as well? If you enjoyed this video and want more Grustery content, please like, subscribe, share, comment below with any tips that helped you in your Returnal runs. But until next time, keep it gooey.
Grusting in the hoobers, grusting in the roombas, grusting in the hoobers. Now we trying new grust.
Now we try to grust.
Now we got to try
Looking for a nimbus. Rambless and not rambless. I'm just trying to rambless. You don't have to sour. You just got to shower. Looking for a shower.